Newsflash, the government has been trampling all over your rights.
Screw your freedom.
Especially if you're a Muslim, and I actually think that despite whatever rhetoric you're hearing, a Trump presidency is the best possible thing that could ever happen to Muslims.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning.
And this is why. So already, you know, if you've seen my video about Yasser Qadi, the deep state is keeping tabs on Muslims and trying to control Islamic ideology. They do this by interacting with Muslim leaders without anyone knowing and trying to push a more westernized, softer form of Islam. The problem with this is our government is supposed to be restrained from doing things like these.
Is that legal?
I will make it legal.
So in the United States, this country was founded by, we were originally colonies of a monarchy where there was a king off in England. The colonies rebelled, they defeated the guy, they got their freedoms, and then they made a document called the Constitution that lays out the rules for our government. They put amendments on this Constitution like the right to free speech. This is so the government can't control what you're saying, and the body politic can learn better and better what sort of government they need to have in order to make things better. They have the right to bear arms. This is so that they can get weapons and wipe out the government if the government ever turns on them. That is the purpose of this. It's not for hunting deer. It's not so you can go skeet shooting. It's to wipe out a tyrannical government.
Mao said political power goes out of the barrel of a gun. He killed about 80 million people because he's the only guy that had the guns. And the mega banks that control the planet and brag that they've taken over, in Bloomberg, AP, Reuters, you name it, brag that they're going to get our guns as well. They've taken everybody's guns but the Swiss and the American people. And when they get our guns, they can have their world tyranny while the government buys 1.6 billion bullets, armored vehicles, tanks, helicopters, Predator drones, armed, now in U.S. skies, being used to arrest people in North Dakota. The Second Amendment isn't there for duck hunting. It's there to protect us from tyrannical government and street thugs. Hitler took the guns. Stalin took the guns. Mao took the guns. Fidel Castro took the guns. Hugo Chavez took the guns. And I'm here to tell you, 1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms. Doesn't matter how many lemmings you get out there on the street begging for them to have their guns taken. We will not relinquish them. Do you understand? That's why you're going to fail, and the establishment knows no matter how much propaganda, the Republic will rise again when you attempt to take our guns.
And that's why it's the most important, or at least tied with the First Amendment. The Fourth Amendment allows no search and seizure without probable cause and a signature by a magistrate. This one is violated, especially if you're a Muslim. So what happens is there's things like Project Stellar Wind, which is this project we heard about from a whistleblower named Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden worked for the CIA and the NSA, and around 2013, I can't remember the exact year, I read his book Permanent Record a while ago. He talked about something called Project Stellar Wind, where the government is storing everything everyone is saying on the internet into a permanent hard drive.
When they talked to the heads of the agency, the NSA and the CIA and the FBI and all this stuff, they told them, the White House and the Office of Legal Counsel and, you know, the president's attorneys, all of these guys had decided this would be legal to do. But we can't tell you why. We can't show you the legal authorization for it. You just got to take our word for it. And so they did this, and this became a mass surveillance program called Stellar Wind, which they said was supposed to monitor the phone calls and internet communications, emails, and things like that of everybody in the United States and around the world who they could get access to for links to Al-Qaeda. Because if you remember in the wake of the September 11th attacks, they were saying, we thought there could be sleeper cells of Al-Qaeda that were just, peppered all throughout the country, and they were going to spring up at any moment. Of course, like weapons of mass destruction, it just didn't exist. It was all a power grab. But on that basis, they started doing this in secret, and it was completely unconstitutional. It was completely illegal, even under the very loose requirements of the Patriot Act. But they did it for so long that they got comfortable with it, and they thought, this is a really powerful capability. What if we started using this for stuff that was other than terrorism? Because it wasn't finding any terrorists, because there weren't any terrorists.
This is the permanent record that he gets the title of his book from. They try to defend this by saying we're not searching people's stuff, we're just storing their stuff. But this would be like saying, oh, I'm not smoking cigarettes. I just have an entire closet full of cigarettes that are just there to have. I'm just storing them, right? That's very, very suspicious. The government doesn't need this. I think the best chance we have for having Edward Snowden pardoned, right? So Edward Snowden's being chased by our government now. He's hiding somewhere. No one's really sure where, probably Russia. He might get pardoned by Trump. That's what a lot of like more liberty-minded people are hoping for. And we're hoping that this permanent record will be destroyed. We're also seeing where there's been this trend in politics where the government has been putting more and more pressure on social media companies to control everything we're saying.
If you dare to publish or say anything she deems to be hate or misinformation, it is now social media companies that are going to have to be held accountable and pay the price. Listen to this.
And will put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
We are going to hold you accountable, not just for companies that platform these ideas, but people who continue to spread these ideas as well.
Just as Mueller indicted a lot of Russians who were engaged in direct election interference and boosting Trump back in 2016.
Listen, right here.
But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence.
Whether American citizens should be civilly or criminally charged for posting propaganda, whatever that means, on the internet, that would be a better deterrent.
So you saw this on TikTok. A lot of you Muslims, whenever the letter from Osama bin Laden was suddenly deleted from the Guardian, the newspaper, and everyone was trying to find it, and a lot of people were able to hit it by looking for it on YouTube, and they found my video. That's where I got a lot of my subscribers. So they're doing things like that. We have Mark Zuckerberg on a Joe Rogan podcast telling us that the FBI was putting pressure on him of what to say, what not to say.
Is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's like very professional law enforcement, they come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously.
This isn't a conspiracy. We have the Twitter files where there's all kinds of correspondence between the leads of Twitter and the intelligence agencies where they were controlling what sort of posts would go out.
I think a lot of people have questions. How involved is the government in monitoring and censoring the speech of ordinary people? What we've seen so far already, and we have definite conclusive proof of, is that there are lots and lots of reports where we see Twitter executives saying things like DHS flagged this, the FBI flagged this, and then there's a whole thread where they decide what to do about it. Do we remove it? Do we put a label on it? So there's tons of that stuff where they're clearly getting communications from the FBI. We also know that they have meetings, not just with the FBI and the DHS, but also a surprise was the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, who I hadn't heard that before. That was a new one. And then we're learning a lot about the kind of scraping of raw intelligence and fire hosing it to the government, all kinds of government agencies on the back end. So the government is harvesting tons of information from these companies and then all turning around and spitting it back to companies like Twitter in the form of requests for, maybe bannings, maybe shadow bans, maybe deletions or labels and that sort of thing. It's fascinating.
And so already, still today, anything owned by Meta, like Instagram or Facebook, is completely compromised and run by the deep state, the CIA, NSA, these intelligence agencies. And Kamala was advocating for more of this openly. You can see it in this clip from her.
If you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable.
And from Jen Psaki.
So here's Jen Psaki, the former professional liar at the White House, and she's going to tell you this.
But even if Trump is defeated tomorrow, he has exposed during his time out there some serious limitations within our system. And it may be time to ask ourselves things like whether social media platforms should have the freedom to operate at a lower level of accountability than local television networks.
First of all, how do you get lower accountability than zero?
No shit.
This is them wanting to censor social because they don't have any accountability. You don't have any fucking accountability. Is there anything they haven't lied about? They lied about Iraq twice. They lied about Afghanistan for 20 years. They lied about Syria. They lied about Libya. They lied about Ukraine. They're currently lying about Ukraine. They lied about COVID. They lied about lockdowns. They lied about where the virus came from, mass, transmissibility, contraction, herd immunity, natural immunity. There wasn't a fucking thing, the side effects. There's not a goddamn thing that they haven't lied about in the last 20 years of my life, 40 years of my life. And these motherfuckers want to censor other people because they might be spreading misinformation. The biggest, yes, go ahead. The biggest liars, as we all know, is the government. Second is the corporate-owned media. And a distant third are randos on social media. That's the fucking fact, okay? And if it wasn't for social media, we wouldn't know about any of those lies about the Syrian war, the Ukraine war, or COVID, or the vaccines, or masks, or lockdowns, or all the shit they did to children during COVID, or all the shit they're doing to children who are confused about their gender identity before they hit fucking puberty. We wouldn't know any of that shit if it wasn't for social media. So fuck fucking cunts like this. Writer propaganda asshole.
And from John Kerry.
There's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick, and, has an agenda, and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence.
What? What the fuck?
Our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. What we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change.
Not today. And all these people have deep affiliations with these globalist entities like the World Economic Forum that want to control everybody's speech. This is what they did with the Canadian truckers who protested the vaccine in Canada.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
You can see where they used drones to look at their faces and froze their bank accounts without any due process of law. So due process of law is where you're accused of a crime and you have rights to a trial. You can cross-examine hostile witnesses. You can have an attorney who comes and advocates for you. All of this. None of that was allowed for these people. Their bank accounts were just frozen by like this big brother government. You can see the same thing happening with people in the UK right now who are being bullied and threatened for saying things that the government doesn't like on social media.
Arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the electronic communications network under Section 127 of the Communications Act, okay? So you do not have to say that may harm your defence if you don't mention one question, something which you later are in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand that?
So I'm actually being arrested?
You're going to be arrested, okay?
Right.
So you got to the police station.
Right.
You, okay, this is in relation to some comments that you've made on
There's
the Facebook
dozens of
page.
videos just like this on X. You can see them where people are being arrested just for questioning. The UK government is locking these people up, but in the United States, at least, we're seeing a little bit of what looks like a reprieve for this. Trump has done things that are signaling that things are changing in the United States. And a big one is the Department of Government Efficiency, where Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are going to work together to try to just gut all these governmental agencies of a bunch of their power. And another good thing we're seeing is that Tulsi Gabbard has been appointed as the Director of National Intelligence, and she is super pro-freedom, pro-civil liberties, as you can see in this video.
Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom and no such thing as public liberty. Without freedom of speech. I love our country, and I cherish our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution.
You have what looks like a populist revolt against these concentrations of power in the intelligence agencies. Now, it's going to look like Trump's side is really, really evil in the mainstream media.
Now, the country is going lurching back to the right. I hope it's not going as far right as that which happened in Germany in the 1930s.
Are you envisioning another Hitler? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, why is that? Well, all these mainstream media companies are all owned by a handful of shareholders like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, Geo Capital investment firms. It's just a handful of these investment firms that own all this stuff. You know, the late night talk show hosts, MSNBC, CNN, ABC, all of this is owned by this small collection of these shareholders. And so these are tied in with the deep state, and so they exert this powerful influence that tries to keep America perpetually at war and perpetually buying vaccines and on medication and everything, because this maximizes the profits of their corporate owners. It looks like Trump's going to just gut all this stuff. And this is good for Muslims worldwide, because if the American government is no longer working as a puppet to try to increase sales of weapons, that means less Muslims are going to get blown up all over the world. I mean, why do you think the United States is constantly at war with people? It's because they're selling weapons. I mean, look at Dick Cheney. He was former president of Halliburton and then the vice president. And next thing you know, we're in over 10 years of war in Afghanistan and Iraq. So, yeah. I think overall it's going to be a better situation for Muslims. I think you're going to have more civil liberties and less of your brothers and sisters are going to be getting blown up to sell weapons overseas.
Pondering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious.